And joining me now is our newsmaker at the moment, Jyotiraditya Scindia, the Civil Aviation Minister, joins us. Mr. Scindia, in the last few days, we've seen plenty of congestion at the airports, almost chaos in several parts, especially in T3, the international airport, the domestic airport in Delhi. Who do you hold accountable? Where does the buck stop in for this mess that seems to have emerged in our airports heading into holiday season?
So I think, Rajdeep, it's very important first to be able to set the context for you and through you for our viewers. Pre-COVID, we had the highest point of travelers per day at roughly about 4.1 lakh per day in India. We've gone through then the low of COVID. And I'm glad to inform viewers that we've had a V-shaped recovery in the area of civil aviation. This week, we have successively, for 4 or 5 days, touched above 4 lakh and reached a new high of almost 4.28 lakh travelers 2 or 3 days ago. Now, whilst on the one hand, it is a reaffirmation and it is a huge positive sign for our beleaguered civil aviation industry in India. At the same time, it also positions itself as challenges on the operations front. So on the one hand, we have travelers who are desirous, anxious to travel, eager to travel. On the other hand, we also have airlines that are anxious and eager to provide their services after being on the ground for a long period of time during COVID. Now, in between both these centers of A, demand, and B, supply of services, is the value chain of an airport. And it is the job of an airport to provide seamless, efficient throughput for demand to reach the supply point. And this is exactly where the clogging has happened. So first, let me be very clear that it is the domain and the responsibility of the airport to be able to provide that seamless travel. So when this occurred sometime last week, I took a meeting with all our airports, CISF, BCAS, and all the regulatory agencies. And we outlined a process by which we looked at the whole operations exercise. And I literally had to get into the weeds of it and do an operations exercise from when a customer enters the airport facility till when he boards the plane. Identify exactly where the critical paths on that, the bottlenecks on the critical path were, where those choke points were, and then establish a process of making sure that we remove those bottlenecks on the critical path to provide that smooth flow. Obviously, that's not something that could happen overnight because even the airports had not augured for a capacity increase to 4.28 lakhs. We have then, I'm sorry, this is going to be a slightly long answer, but we have then put together, along with all the stakeholders, we put together a chart of 12 steps that we need to take on the 12th of this month, which was last Monday when I visited the airport. I had identified on the 7th that the first thing we need to do is create more gateways into the airport. We had 16 gateways altogether, 14 for passengers and 2 for crew and for our specially abled people. I've said to expand that, and I'm glad to report to you that when I went on the 12th, that was expanded to 16 gates for passengers and 2 for the crew and specially abled. We then looked at the second clogging point. The second clogging point is the security check process, and that's the main issue. There were lines miles long, and I can completely understand the grief, the anxiety, and the pain that our passengers went through. We had today, at that point of time on the 7th, 7 plus 2 ATRS, automatic tray retrieval systems, and normal systems in place for the throughput of passengers on security check. The problem was not with the manning of those because we had enough CISF people on board. Third, 11 plus 2 is clearly not enough for the size of Dial Airport. So the first thing I said is increase this overnight. And we put in place a target that 11 must go to 14 by next Monday, which was the 12th. So when I went to the airport on the 12th, of this month, both things had happened. We had created two extra doorways, and we had gone from a capacity of 11 plus 2, which is 13, to a capacity of 16, 13 plus 3, in terms of security areas. We sat with all stakeholders, and I brought airlines on board on the meeting the 12th at the airport itself as well. And we put together a full operations exercise up till scheduling of aircraft, landing and takeoff. Because if you bunch too many aircraft on landing and takeoff in peak hours, that then creates the backlog at the airport facility and creates the long queues. So we need to shed some of the peak hour load as well on the supply side. So we put together a chart of 12 steps that needs to be taken, and I want to go through those 12 steps with you so that I'm able to tell you and your viewers what is it that we've achieved and what is still work in progress that needs to be achieved. So the first direction I gave was that we need to have crowd management in place at the entrance gates, which means we need to have usherers to help Rajdeep Sardesai, to help person X, person Y. If this gate is clogged, which gate is a much easier gate through which you can enter. And there must be a command and control center within the airport that is monitoring all 16 gates so as to direct people. That, I want to report to you, has been in place since the 12th on the 12th of this month. So it means from the 13th, which is yesterday. The second step I said is that above every gate, all 16 gates, I want a digital board. Tells Rajdeep Sardesai exactly what the queuing time at each gate is. So when I get off my car and I come to this gate and it's fully clogged, I see on the board, you can go to gate number 11, which has only a 1 minute waiting time. And I will take my trolley and go to gate number 11. So that happens automatically. Again, I'm pleased to report to you, I had given a target date of 13th of December, which is yesterday. All those digital boards, as you yourself have seen in the news, as well as on Twitter, are up on all 16 gates that tells passengers exactly where the waiting line is. Now, step number 3, I also said that DIAL as well as all airlines should put that feed directly on social media so that if Rajdeep Sardesai or any traveler is traveling to the airport, he can go to the Twitter site of the airport or the airline and see exactly which gate is the gate that he must alight on so that the least amount of time is spent getting into the airport. That also, I am pleased to report to you, has been done. The fourth step I said is, if you remember, we have a Naka about 1.5 kilometers before the airport, where the cars go through a little bit of a security check with those speed breakers. I said above that Naka, put a digital board as well, which very clearly identifies the waiting time. And that digital board has been put up last night as well. So 4 steps on the area of entry clogging at airports have already been taken. And as your channel has also reported, that problem has been resolved to a great extent today. We then move to the next area. The minute you or I as a traveler get into the airport, we go in for our security, for our check-in. Now, I was told apparently that there were 1 or 2 airlines, and I don't want to name them on your channel because the problem has been taken care of. If it hadn't, I would have named and shamed those airlines. 2 airlines in particular were not positioning their people in time for the peak hour traffic check-in process to happen, which is why lines were happening on the check-in area. That today I am happy to report to you has also been corrected, and those 2 airlines, not only in Delhi, but Bombay, Madurai, Guwahati, Patna and Bangalore, have placed their people at the check-in counter so that there's no problem for our travelers when they go in. That was step number 5. Step number 6, when I took the meeting on the 12th of December, we said you've done 16 security check-in processes. I want that to increase every single week as we go by. So I'm glad to report to you that I'd given a target that on the 14th of December, the 17th automatic tray retrieval system or the normal system must be in place at the airport. And I myself had identified an area between 2 rows of security check-in where they had put a barrier. I said, remove this barrier, create the space for an additional check-in security check area, and that I'm pleased to report to you today has been done. So these 6 steps have already been completed as we speak today. Now, what is due in the next few days? There are 4 things that we are working on as we speak. A lot of the airlines and travel agencies issue tickets with barcodes. Those barcodes, in many places, the printers that are used or the paper that is used those barcodes become unreadable. So when you and I go as a traveler for our entry, it takes a long time for the CISF guy to be able to scan that barcode and allow entry. So I have requisitioned all airlines that by the 15th of December, we must make sure that all scanning of barcodes is picture perfect, and therefore that facilitates entry into the airport. The second step that we've taken, as I mentioned earlier in the interview, is on the supply side. Today, peak hour landings and departures are at a very high number, which creates this clogging in the system. So we have said we need to reduce that by 10% and take those airlines into two options. Those flights must go into non-peak hours at T3 or should be transferred to peak hours to T1 or T2. That also will ease the pressure on the system within the airport currently. That should be done in the next 3 or 4 days. It takes a little time for airlines also to adjust their schedules. Otherwise, there's huge inconvenience to passengers. So that is work in progress, which will be done in the next 2 or 3 days. The third step that we're looking at is on the international side. On both ends. One, to install greater number of security checks machines on the international side as well as make sure that the landing cards are given to international citizens on board an aircraft, as opposed to waiting for them to disembark and then fill it up at the counter. Those processes will be in place in the next day or two. Longer term, we have 2 points that we're looking at. We want to increase the security check-in from the 20 that we have anticipated to almost 23 in the next 3 or 4 months. And longer term solution, get T1 operational, which is slated for operation starting next December 23. Try and move that up by a month or two prior to peak winter season coming in, so that the clogging does not happen longer term from next year onwards.